It's something we wish we never had to report on, but unfortunately, things like student deaths or other tragedies related to our schools come up. We often get messages from districts saying grief counselors are on campus.
The reality is although you may not know much about them, districts do have crisis intervention teams on standby to respond whenever a major traumatic event occurs, either on or even off campus.
And Trooper Steve spent some time in Osceola County. You met with some crisis intervention team members there.
That's right, guys. So from the aftermath of an active shooter to the untimely passing of students, from unfortunate car crashes and everything in between, the Osceola County School District has teams in place that are trained, highly trained, to support students, staff, and parents immediately following an event, with the ability to help as long as needed. Given my background down there as a law enforcement officer, as well as my assistance on the Osceola School District Safety and Security Committee and the chairman of the School Resource Officer Task Force, I wanted to find out exactly how this works, and turns out it comes from the very top. So I spoke to school board member Julius Melendez and coordinator of the Student Services, Angela Purdue, to just see how it all works. Safety and security pretty important to you, not only just being a school board member, but being a father, I'm sure.
Yes, and kids speak now, and kids have, when I first grew up, there was no internet on your phone and everything like that. I had beepers back in the day when I was in high school. Now they're aware of it. Every time there's a mass shooting, every time something happens, students know. The days of innocence of them just, letting the adults do everything, they're paying attention and they're watching the news. They have social media and they see the feeds.
Yeah, I hear you. Do you think there is a sense of almost complacency on behalf of the student to where you guys have to be constantly creative, positive, and different ways to interact with them, so one, they feel safe and they understand kind of what's going on?
That happened initially.
Okay.
When we're talking about the days of Columbine, it was so far removed. But the unfortunate reality of society today, it's almost becoming everywhere. Okay. So when they hear about it happening at malls, they hear about it at different high schools, now the colleges, students now, believe it or not, are now taking it more seriously. There's always one-offs of some student that wants to be a rebel and kind of want to do their own thing. But the reality is, when it first occurred, the first mass shooting, everyone was like, nah, that's not in my backyard. You know what I mean? That happens in, Massachusetts, that happens in New York, or that happens in Colorado. That doesn't happen here. But the reality, then Marjorie Stoneman Douglas happened in Parkland, then it became a reality in Florida.
But this is a topic a lot of people don't want to talk about until a major crash happens and someone loses their life, or a student, tragically, something occurs, or even a teacher. But you guys have a team in place that is working around the clock.
Crisis intervention teams have existed for a long time.
Okay.
The reality, though, is we never had the funding from the mental health allocations from the state of Florida to about 10 or 15 years ago to fully staff it. Because it's a difference to have an idea, this is what we like to do, and actually have a dedicated funding source from the state of Florida to be able to do that. Because at first, my thought process was the crisis intervention team was, you pull a teacher and say, hey, you're doing double duty. I'm proud to say that now the allocation of crisis intervention are nothing but support professionals. They're psychologists, mental health therapists, they're social workers. They're people fully trained in their initial career.
So the total number for crisis team members is 75. They're out at schools every day working with students, families, supporting schools, but then they have a day a week where they are on the crisis team, they're on call. If there's a call and we need to be at a school, we have a team of people who are on call for that day.
Unfortunately, in the middle of the night, a tragedy has happened with someone involved in the school. Mm-hmm. Who's making that call, and where is that call going, and how does that trickle down?
So how we find out about it may vary.
Okay.
Our safety and security group within the school district have good connections with law enforcement, so sometimes that's how we find out. Sometimes the principal is informed because it's their child or their staff member, and then they will reach out to our area superintendent. But once we here at Student Services are notified that something has happened, one of the first things I would do is to reach out to the school principal so that we know what the school principal needs from us. We've had cases where the principal calls me and is crying because her student has died. And so then we're able to provide guidance of here's how we can help you.
So you're not just there for the student, you're there for everybody.
Yeah. And then once we have an idea of what the principal would like, then I start reaching out to the crisis team leads for the day. We pick our team, who needs to go, how many people do we need, and we start working on the logistics. We're going to meet at this time, on this day, at this school, here's what we're going to do. And then we have a crisis information sheet that is sent out to everyone who needs to know the plan.
What happens when that call comes out of violence in the schools? How obviously you're not running to the school.
It's a different level of response, and one of the things that we train on as a part of the Prepare curriculum is there are some crises that are building level crises, right? A student got a 1 on the FAST and is very upset. Some things require more of a district level response. Death of a student, death of a teacher, our district crisis team goes out. But there are certainly events that are regional level responses. A school shooting would be one of those. When we had the hurricanes here, when we had the tornadoes years ago and had so much damage, that's a regional level response. So with a school shooting, and Parkland is an example of that, that was so many agencies and so many districts going to support that community. The first part of that, when that phone call was made, would be our safety and security department. They're the ones who would handle getting everyone safe. We have a reunification process. If we need to evacuate a school, where do those students go? How do we communicate with parents where your students have gone while we're keeping them safe? We had a fire at a school I worked at one year and had to evacuate everybody into the fields, So we had to have a plan for what that looked like, and then how do we contact parents? But our safety and security department is that kind of first responder in terms of dealing with what would be something like a school shooting or violence on school campus. And then once that part has been brought safe, then the crisis team comes in to provide that more emotional support to the students, to the staff there at the school.
Where would you say parent involvement is when it comes to the success of the child that might be in crisis?
It's vital. It is so vital. So the parents really know their child best. They're going to know that child better than anyone at the school is going to know. And they're going to be the ones that the child goes home to, and looks for comfort. So one of the things that we do as a part of the crisis team is we do informational materials that can go home to the families. So it might be something like, something difficult happened at our school today, a classmate of your child died. Here's some things that you may see. And what grieving looks like. That's normal. A child who is 5 and experiences the death of a classmate may that night want to sleep with mom.
Right.
May suck their thumb, or an older child may all of a sudden become much more clingy than they used to be. So we provide some education for families about what's normal grieving, and then if the student is having something beyond normal grieving, where to go for more support.
At the end of the day, we want our parents to know that they feel safe and secure when they take our kids to school. This isn't something that's an afterthought. We're not reacting at the moment whenever something happens. We already know who's going to go to a school, what their purpose is. They have a defined mission, and I just want parents to know that the school district of Osceola County takes safety and security seriously, not just before the incident, but after the incident occurs.
Now, those crisis teams are broken up into groups of maybe about 15 to 20 individuals, and they're each assigned a day of the week that they're on call. Teams can be broken down or combined depending on the response necessary. So today, this was an overview of what the teams look like from the larger scale traumatic events that may happen. Now, what happens in the schools on the daily when individual students need help? So, coming up tomorrow on News 6 at 9, I got to sit down with the school psychologist as well as a social worker to talk about the boots on the ground and the schools and what things really look like. And it was, I thoroughly enjoy being able to be not only a law enforcement officer and a news anchor, but to have the access to dive into things like this because it was a question I always had in my mind. We hear about the responses. I've served on these boards, and then the next thing you know, we get the messages, hey, the response team's en route. What does that mean?
Yeah.
See, you even said it. What does that mean? So that's, to me, it was the big importance for parents to really see, hey, okay, this is what this is about.
In the full scope of it, you've been on this Safety and Security Committee and chairman of the School Resource Officer Task Force. And so, I mean, there's a big spectrum of things we're looking at, not just responses, but just prevention.
Absolutely.
And like caring for the whole person, not just test scores, you know?
You want to you want to make sure that the foundation is secure. And I think what that represents is not only the foundation for the students, but the district, their employees, the schools and stuff like that. Being able to serve on that board, you know, giving insight, opinions and stuff like that. We meet quarterly for the district. The next meeting's next month that I'll be attending. But to chair even the SRO board, we met with parents, civilians in the community that provided their input. And I got to give shout out to the Osceola School District. They allow that input and the results are there. You could see it. These therapists are excited to be doing their job, even though they're surrounded by, you know, it's heavy stuff.
The school is a community.
Absolutely,
Right.
and they need their own foundation. So thanks, guys.
All right, Steve, thank you.